Now, Andrea, karma can be a lot of things. But I will note, much like when it comes to the prince formerly known as Andrew, or the Andrew formerly known as the prince, he is caught up in the Epstein files not because of what he allegedly did with girls, the trafficking, the raping, so on and so forth. It is a technical matter of information that he shared in his official capacity. That is the reason he is now facing legal troubles. Kristi Noem did not lose her job because American citizens were being indiscriminately snatched up in the streets and asked to show their papers later. She didn't lose her job because 2 Americans were killed by a rogue agency within her organization. She didn't lose her job because children are being warehoused in a facility in Dilley, Texas that substandard doesn't even seem to cut it. No, she lost her job because of the ads. But however karma comes, she seems to have arrived.
Well, this is a supposed reason that she was fired. We really have no idea because she was also given a new job, of which I'm concerned about, called the Shield of the Americas, where she's going to be working with Latin American leaders on security, border security, other vague issues. So in some ways, this just feels like window dressing, because sometimes you fire a cabinet secretary because they embarrassed you or because you're trying to change policy. This really isn't the case here, because the only thing that should matter to Americans when they see this story is that there is no sign that this president is changing his policy on mass deportations, and he's not doing anything to help the kids who are detained in Texas right now. He's not calling off the warehouses. He's not removing the remaining officers in Minneapolis. So he can create this story and move her to a new job and bring in another loyalist, but that's not changing what Americans are actually really angry with him about.
That Vaughn, is a very fundamental point and thread through this storyline that Andrea just put out there. Because at the end of the day, when you stop and think about it, of all the things Kristi Noem did, Donald Trump going to be upset that she's a plane? I mean, Simone laid it out.
The ad, baby, it's the ad.
Yeah, the ad. I mean, it's like. So it's just stretches your sense of what's right, wrong, and reasonable. I find it also amusing that when I look at the 2 popcorn heads that sort of bounce around Donald Trump in this universe that have been standing out over the last 6 weeks, there's her and her performative stuff. There's Pam Bondi and all that crazy. But then the pièce de résistance is Kash Patel, who goes to the Olympics and is sitting there guzzling back the beer, hanging out with the boys, beating the hell out of tables, doing the rah-rah jock thing. He still has a job. And we know Donald Trump don't like people who drink around him. He doesn't like that at all. So how do you assess when he's looking at this array of crazy and behavior that is largely inconsistent with what he would like them to be doing, because that's the kind of news he doesn't want coming back to him. How do you assess this environment right now? Should we be looking down the road at Patel, maybe Bondi? My argument is they stay because they're still useful.
Correct. Loyalty only gets you so far.
Right.
Are you executing on that loyalty? Who went and got those ballots down in Fulton County?
Tulsi Gabbard
and Kash Patel.
That's it.
His FBI.
That's it.
And Donald Trump, the legal bounds really don't matter to.
Starting us off tonight is none other than Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Governor Walz, when I saw the news this morning, you were the first person I thought of, given everything you have been through, everything you have lived through, and the people of your state have lived through. So Kristi Noem is obviously on her way out. You've lived through so much on her watch. What was your reaction this morning? What's been your reaction to the news?
Well, good to be with you, Jen. Good news has been kind of scarce since Kristi Noem and Donald Trump's folks showed up in December. And so glad she's gone. But I think you understand it and everybody else does. It's the people who are putting them in place, a rogues gallery of incompetent, cruel cabinet secretaries. And this one was particularly loathsome. But What I think we need to make clear is the damage that she's done here and continues to do. I remind your viewers that there's still 650 of these folks here. We're trying to recover from this, and it's going to take us years, and it may be generational trauma on our children. We don't know where our kids are at. We need answers. And so I'm glad she's gone, but it gives us an inflection point. And this is what I would really encourage Congress to do their job, Republicans in Congress. And as you're talking about, whether it's Senator Mullen, whoever it is, put the guardrails on right now. We need to be part of the investigations into Renee and Alex's death. We need to know where our children are at. We need them to quit taking Minnesota's money. So, I do think it's okay to celebrate at times. And former Secretary Noem and I go way back, and the trouble started long before this when she chose not to address COVID and spread COVID throughout the upper Midwest, killing people across the area. And this incompetency then to be picked. I think it's really interesting what you said was she wasn't fired for killing Alex or Renee or being in charge of that. She wasn't fired for taking children. She wasn't fired for dragging American citizens out of their home with no shoes in underwear when it's 20 below zero. Mm-hmm. They only make changes when it becomes politically problematic for them, because they're not going to change what they want to do. They still want these mass deportations. Stephen Miller is still there whispering in the president's ear, and they still believe they don't need warrants. They still believe they don't need to give us accountability for murdered Minnesotans. And so I think this is an inflection point that Kristi Noem was incompetent. She was cruel. She was terrible. But the institution at DHS and what was carried out and what the White House is saying, that's what needs to be addressed.
As you noted, and I think it's so important for people to remember, and everybody watching followed what happened in your state, was still happening in your state so closely. She's no longer going to be in the cabinet. What should accountability for Kristi Noem, given everything she's done, look like in your view?
Well, and there needs to be, and I think that's one of our founding principles, that no one's above the law and they're accountable. I would just say at this time that former Secretary Noem should probably get used to spending more time in Minnesota, because I have a pretty good feeling in the future she may be doing that, because we have got to get accountability. We need to know the people who are involved in this, and the ones that were caught on tape, and the brave Minnesotans. And again, they're out of Minnesota because Minnesotans took to the streets, and it turns out they like their constitutional rights. They like to protect their neighbors' human rights. And that's what Minnesotans did. And we need accountability on every single one of those. So from whether it's the murder of Renee and Alex, whether it's why Liam Ramos ended up in Texas, why we don't know where some of our children are, why they tell stories where a gentleman with a fractured skull tripped and fell in detainment, and the hundreds of other aggressions, all the way down to, gassing of children with chemical munitions out there. It's ridiculous. And at this point in time, and I was on the Hill yesterday testifying in one of their diversions, Kristi Noem's down the way being asked to simply state calling Renee and Alex domestic terrorists is incredibly painful for Minnesotans and their family. And she doesn't even have the decency to do that. And so here's my question is, well, maybe the president could do that for her. Maybe the president could say, you're right, that's why she's gone, we would do this. So I don't know, on a day like this, I'm glad she's gone, but they just keep lining up sycophants. There's one qualification for this job, and that's loyalty to Donald Trump. And your story there of saying that, when she shot Cricket, all the rest of us are, of course, horrified by this, whatever. Donald Trump thinking that would be good for border security, boy, there's a psychology study right there of what they think about this. And that's the way they've approached this. The whole operation in Minnesota has been cruelty.
It tells you so much. I just want to ask you about something you just said, because I think accountability is something so many people are hungry for in this country. When you say she should expect to spend more time in Minnesota, what do you mean by that? Tell people watching what you mean by that.
Well, look, our folks are going to be looking into each and every one of these incidents that happened. We're going to want answers. Who gave the orders to do this? Who said that these folks could do that? Why within 20 minutes before understanding what happened, she found the need to slander Minnesotans, American citizens? Why did they not retract that? And why were Minnesota investigators at the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension not allowed to be on these scenes? Where's the evidence? We need the evidence to do this. And I know both County Attorney Moriarty, I know Attorney General Ellison. People are looking for accountability. That's what the system is. This isn't, as Donald Trump is, he came here on retribution. We're not looking for retribution. We're looking for justice. And we're looking to make sure that no one's above the law. So Kristi Noem, it sure seems to me there's a lot of unanswered questions. I wrote her in early December asking about the detainments. I wrote her in January, and I wrote her again this week, and I have not received an answer. We have children who we don't know where they're at. They're still unaccounted for. And I know that whether it's the war or it's Epstein or everything else, folks are moving on. We're still in the midst of this. She was still, until this morning, in charge of that, and they chose to totally ignore us. They chose not to answer. They don't believe they're accountable. And so I can't say it enough. Don't give them any money. Don't confirm a DHS secretary. Continue to drag them in front of you and put the guardrails around. If a DHS, ICE, Border Patrol, whoever it is, federal agent is involved in the killing or violence or violating constitutional rights, the states have to be able to be part of that investigation.
This situation is politically bad for Donald Trump for a couple of major reasons. First, whenever he fires someone from his inner circle, there is always the risk that the person may eventually turn against him. Former allies who lose their positions often become critics, and they may reveal information about internal operations, controversies, or questionable decisions. Even if legal consequences are limited, public exposure of political misconduct, financial issues, or alleged corruption can still create serious political and reputational damage. Another factor shaping this situation is the legal environment following the Trump free United States ruling by the Supreme Court of the United States that decision expanded presidential immunity for certain official acts. While it does not provide total protection, it does make it more difficult to hold the president legally accountable for actions taken while in office. Because of this, critics argue that a greater threat to Trump in situations like this may not be criminal prosecution, but political, financial, and reputational consequences if formal insiders expose damaging information. There is also the possibility of domino effect once a high-level firing occurs. During Trump's first administration, the White House experienced frequent turnover. Several officials were either dismissed or resigned, which created ongoing controversy and constant media attention. Reports from journalists and former insiders have suggested that Trump himself later recognized that a first major dismissal during his presidency triggered a pattern of departures and scandals that continued throughout the administration. Another competition is that replacing one official does not necessarily solve deeper institutional problems. Critics argued that challenges within agencies such as U.S. Immigration and Customs Informants and the United States Department of Homeland Security cannot be fixed simply the changing relationship. If issues inside those agencies continue or worsen, then responsibility may shift back to administration that appointed their leadership in the first place. For that reason, the political risk for Trump is not only about one person leaving office. The broader concern is that ongoing problems within major federal agencies could reflect on the administration's leadership and decision-making. If multiple appointees face criticism or controversy, opponents may argue that the pattern reflects deeper issues in how the administration selects and manages its officials.